everyone, welcome to Tom's Trains, another edition today. We're looking at cleaning an airbrush. This is my airbrush, it's the Evolution 2-in-1 by Harder and Steenbeck. It's a very useful piece of kit. I use it for all sorts of things like painting and weathering, and consequently it gets knocked around a little bit. After a while your airbrush will need stripping down and cleaning, and this is what we're going to look at today. So it's going to be a complete strip down, effectively a service for the airbrush. We shall lubricate it fully, and I shall also be replacing some of the internal parts. So without further ado, let's get on and strip down the airbrush. The first thing that I'm going to do is take off the body here. That just goes to one side, we don't need to clean that, and also release the chuck that holds the needle in. So that's no problem at all. Then we can undo the front of the airbrush and get rid of the nozzle protector. And also the nozzle, the needle wants to come out at the same time, so that's the nozzle out. And now just bring out the needle as well. Also take off the the colour cup from the airbrush, and that leaves us with the body and a few extra bits on there. So here's the chuck mechanism, so we just unscrew that, put that to one side. Pull out the trigger mechanism, and the final thing that we need to remove is the airflow control valve. So we just need a small spanner for that. Just remove that like so. And that's most of it done. Now, because we're doing a full strip down on this, we also need to remove the sealing valve inside. So I have a special screwdriver from Harder and Steenbeck, this chap here. It's just got a pointed end on there which goes through the nozzle seal, or through the seal, and the screwdriver attachment on there. So just insert down to the rear of the airbrush, rotate until it locks in. I felt it click, and then unscrew. And that is the internal nozzle seal there. That's the airbrush now stripped down to its bare body. Now you can see how quick that was. That's testament to the design of this airbrush by Harder and Steenbeck, and that's probably why I can get away with cleaning it so infrequently. It's a great design airbrush, but you know, it's probably been about a year and a half since I've stripped this down, so it really is essential that I give it a full clean and a bit of a service. If you've got a rubber sealing ring here, then you'll need to remove that before you immerse it in the solution. This one's PTFE, so it should be okay. Now, in order to clean the airbrush, I use some of this stuff. This is Airbrush Restorer. You can get this from places like Everything Airbrush. They're pretty good. They stock a full range of airbrush cleaning accessories, and I do recommend that you get something like this in order to periodically clean the equipment that you have. So I'm just going to pour some of the airbrush cleaner into the bowl. And of course the same techniques and principles apply to any type of airbrush that you might have. Obviously refer to the instruction manual that you have, but this is for the Harder and Steenbeck. So I'm just going to immerse now the body into that solution and give that a good rinse around. I'm also going to insert the colour cup as well. We're going to give that a good clean, and that's all that we need to do. Everything else we're going to leave out. Now, if you were just servicing your airbrush and just cleaning it normally, you'd probably want to clean the nozzle assembly and the needle and everything else like that. But because today we're just doing a replacement on these parts, I say these components are about 8 years old now on this airbrush, so it's well time that I replace them, and the needle itself has actually got a small bend in the end. So we'll just leave those items to soak in the cleaning solution for a little while, and then we'll come back and we'll scrub the airbrush and reassemble it. One thing that we also need to clean is just the nozzle end cap, so just this protecting element here. We just need to clean this off. Not too much paint gets on this, but as we've got the cleaning fluid out, we might as well just give it a quick going over. And again, I just use the brush like so, just to get in between all of the little parts there like so, and just clean out any paint that's nestled in there from previous spraying. So while the components are soaking then, it's a good idea just to agitate them inside the bowl, just to allow the fluid to fully encapsulate all of the items of the airbrush and soak fully inside. And once it's done, then we'll start using things like this little brush here, just to get right inside the cavities of the airbrush, and these things also are very helpful, along with some cotton wool buds too. And we'll just go in right into the internals of the airbrush and get out any of the nasties that have been lurking in there. Right, I've let these parts now soak in the cleaning fluid for a little while, so I've removed them. I'm just going to now use some of the tissue paper just to clean off, just to get rid of all of the rubbish that's accumulating. You can see there's dirt coming off there from the insides of the threads. And we're just really, again, if you need to go back in, just get some of the cleaning fluid onto there, pick it up, get it in, mash it all around. I'm really just trying to be quite aggressive with it and just give it that thorough clean that you may have not done for a little while. Get your thumbnail in there. That's looking a lot better now. Give that an all over rub. So that's the colour cup pretty much done. I'll set that aside, and what I tend to do after this is just give it a wash in some lukewarm water with a little bit of washing up detergent in there, just to get rid of any of the final parts of the cleaning solution. Now we'll get the airbrush itself out of the cleaning solution, pop it on the tray there, give it an all over wipe first of all, and now I'm going to go in with the cocktail stick and clean right inside here. You can see all that gunk coming out, that's probably not going to come out on a normal clean. So just getting right in there, right down in there, and also right down in the front of the airbrush as well. Look at all that horrible stuff coming out. It's quite surprising how much you can actually remove from inside the airbrush when you try. So there's lots coming out there, just discard that one, get a new one. Same thing. Just trying to remove everything that we can from inside there. And now we go in the back of the airbrush. Again with the cotton wool bud, just across there like so, just twisting it in. Removing any nasties that you might get. You can see, look, all of that coming out. And now we're going to go in with a brush. Let's go in with this one here first of all. Dip it in the cleaning fluid. And in the end, I'm just giving that a bit of a scrub through, just pushing it through inside the airbrush, like that. Just making sure we get everything out. A bit more on the front. And it is a bit of a messy job, there's no doubt. It's, you get it on your hands, you get it all over the place, but it's a job that's worth doing if you can spare the time to do it, probably a bit more often than I do, maybe every couple of months or so. Just strip it down and clean it, and your airbrush will be good to you then. So just trying to get that out there. Now we're going to go right through the barrel, and I use this long cleaning brush for that. So again, dip in the solution, and I'm going right in through the back of the airbrush and just pushing through. And there's lots and lots of stuff coming out there now. And basically you just continue doing this until you're happy that all of the scraps of paint from within the airbrush are completely removed and you've got a really nice clean airbrush to work with. And it does take a little bit of time. It's one of those things. It's just a case of going in, cleaning up once more with the cotton wool bud, poking that in and trying to remove as much of that paint. See, it's still coming out, still all in there. Being patient and just removing everything that you possibly can from within the airbrush. So join me later on, once I've gone through this process more thoroughly, got everything out, and we'll have a look at reassembling the airbrush, lubrication, and finishing off. Right, I've now come back. I've given the airbrush a wash under the tap with some washing up liquid just to clean any final bits off, and you can see that it is now looking really, really shiny and clean. There's nothing in that at all. So we're ready now to start reassembling the airbrush. One of the things that I wanted to do with this was to upgrade the seal, and this is the original seal here. Pretty old, pretty worn. It only has space for one PTFE seal in there, if you can see the white bit there. I'm upgrading it to a triple seal. So that means 3 times the sealing capability, and therefore less paint going back up into the airbrush. So you can see the seal there is larger. And that's just an upgrade that you can do for this particular airbrush to ensure that it works a little bit better. Also, if you're using thin paints like acrylics and so on and so forth, it's quite handy to be able to have those, have the extra sealing capability within the airbrush because they do tend to run back quite easily. So I'm just going to put the new seals in like so. 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to insert those onto the screw like so, push those down into there, and then we'll insert that into the airbrush. This is where this specific screw is really, really handy for this, because the seals hold on to this bit here, and you can screw the new seal into the airbrush with this special tool. So I think it's about £7 or £8, but it is actually quite worthwhile if you have an airbrush of this type. So there we go, just screwing right in the back there, no problem at all, and that is the new seal fitted. Right, we're at the stage now where the airbrush is fully clean and we're ready to start the reassembly. I have a brand new nozzle for the airbrush and also a brand new needle. These are 0.2mm, and I find that gives a nice compromise between detail work and also being able to lay down a heavy coat of paint if I need to. You'll notice if you need to replace the needle or nozzle, if perhaps you don't get a constant cone of paint, or for example the needle's clogging an awful lot, that would suggest that perhaps the needle's a little bit worn. Sometimes as well, if the paint's coming out sideways, there might be a split in the nozzle, so over time they do deteriorate and it's worth replacing them from time to time. So to fit the new nozzle, I simply place it in the end of the protector like so, and then I can go right ahead and screw the whole assembly into the end of the airbrush. Make sure it's nice and tight like that. Okay, so that's the first part, and now we can do some lubrication. Now, a lot of people don't fully understand the purpose of lubrication when it comes to airbrushes. Of course, lubrication allows the working parts to move freely, but it also stops paint going where we don't want it to go. And it's important to lubricate the needle so that those seals that we just put in can work effectively. So this is the brand new needle. I'm just going to get some of the lubrication there, and it's specially formulated for airbrushes. Simply put a little bit onto a cloth like that. You don't need much at all, and just give a couple of wipes over the needle like so. This serves a couple of purposes. Not only does it stop paint going where we don't want it to, but it also stops paint adhering to the needle. So it's worth doing this quite regularly. So after you've cleaned your airbrush, maybe after a spraying session, just so that is nice and lubricated and stays in good condition. The other thing that I'm going to do is just, with the same cloth, just lubricate the trigger mechanism as well, like so. That'll be going back in the airbrush. So we just put that on there, in there. Also going to put a small amount of lubrication on the trigger mechanism. So just a tiny little dab of oil on there, just within the trigger. Pop that in like so, work that in. Just ensures that the trigger action is nice and smooth. Make sure everything lays down correctly. Sometimes a little bit tricky just to get this to screw in as you want it to. Make sure that's in properly. There we go, that's got it. Just a little wipe over. Okay, that's excellent. Now we can go in with our needle from behind and just inserting very carefully through the airbrush. There'll be some resistance there as it goes through the seal, and just a light tap. We don't want to force the needle too far into the nozzle because the nozzle's quite delicate. Now we can use the chuck here to do the needle up like so, and now we can go on with the back of the airbrush itself. Now remember, we didn't clean this, so I'm just going to give it a very light wipe over with the cleaning fluid, just like so, to polish that up. And that's purely for cosmetic reasons. There's no other purpose for doing that. Just makes everything look nice and clean, nice and shiny. There we are. Great. Alright, starting to look like a new airbrush now. So there we go, we can install the colour cup on there as well. There we are, another little wipe. That's now good. And then here we have the airflow control valve. So I'm just going to pop that on. It feels quite nice and smooth actually, so I'm just going to reassemble that onto the airbrush, onto the bottom like that. Tighten it up, and then use the spanner once more to tighten fully. There we go. And that is cleaning a Harder and Steenbeck Evolution 2-in-1 airbrush. That is now as good as new. Everything is lovely and smooth. I'll go away and give that a little test, and that should be good for another couple of years. Thanks very much for watching. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the video description below. I'll be happy to answer them. And remember, of course, to like, comment and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.